Hello, my Astro family. This is Lada from astrolada.com. And today we are speaking on the first day of February, the month of love. We are starting with the topics of relationships and love with a colleague of mine, Michael Reed, who is a Vedic astrologer and who will talk to us about relationships through the Vedic perspective. Hello, Michael.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
Thank you. I'm excited. We haven't done Vedic astrology compatibility for a long time. We haven't talked about love for a long time. Just
Well, yeah, with the world being as it is, it kind of makes that subject a little difficult, which is more of the reason that we need to talk about it, right?
Absolutely. And it's the month of February, so.
Exactly.
So can you tell us, you use Vedic astrology with tropical zodiac, but we're not going to be
Correct.
focusing on that. We'll focus on the Nakshatras, which is the 27 lunar constellations.
Yeah, I wanted to focus today on the Darakaraka, which is a relationship indicator. I'll tell you if for your viewers how to find that in their horoscope, and the Atmakaraka, and a few very simple concepts with the nakshatras that kind of give a good idea of the type of relationship that a person's seeking, the types of people that would probably be good for that particular Darakaraka factor, and types that don't work too.
Wonderful.
Because that's important to understand as well.
Yeah, that's probably the first thing. What doesn't work.
Exactly.
So, can you tell us what a Darakaraka is?
Yeah, the Darakaraka, quite simply put, if you look at your natal chart, the Rashi chart in Vedic astrology, the D1 chart, and you find the planet, except for Rahu and Ketu, you find the planet with the lowest degree in any sign.
And we don't include Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. Yeah?
No, you leave Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune, and Rahu and Ketu out of the equation.
Just the seven visible planets.
7 visible planets, exactly.
Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn.
Correct.
Those with the lowest degree, and you use tropical zodiac.
Tropical zodiac
normal,
is what I use.
The ones in the West, the normal zodiac they use. And that would be the planet that indicates your partner.
Exactly. And, here's a really simple concept to work with this, which is, let's say, for instance, that in an individual's chart happens to be Mars, right? If that person, like, let's say they have a debilitated Mars in their chart, right? What they're really needing in their life is someone who has a strong Mars, like perhaps someone with Mars in Scorpio, or someone with Mars in Aries. But they generally tend to attract to themselves, for the most part, those people with the weak Marses. And so over and over again, you'll generally find their relationship pattern tends to bring to them the types of Mars energy that they don't need. And so you really have to help those people to go, you might want to look for somebody who has a really strong Mars, like, Mars in Capricorn too, exalted Mars, right? Or Mars in Scorpio, or Mars in Aries. And that's a really simple concept you can do.
Yes. So that's fascinating. So you can apply it to all the planets. If Venus is the planet with the lowest degree in your horoscope, and say it's in Virgo, you need to find, which is debilitated, you need to find someone, say, for example, with Venus in Taurus. So my Jupiter is my Darakaraka, the planet with the smallest degree, at 3 degrees in Libra. And Jupiter is known not to be strong there. And my partner has Jupiter in Pisces. So he's
perfect.
So finally.
Exactly. And there's reasons for all that too. Like when you begin to analyze it, like Mars in Cancer energy has this tendency to get really emotionally exhausted and exasperated, and there's that need for like a really good strong Mars energy to do that, to be there and to be present. Same as what you're saying with Jupiter. Jupiter in Libra and Jupiter in Gemini can be a very difficult placement, because there's always several different sides of the equation, right? And that's why Jupiter doesn't function well in, Mercury's rashis. It doesn't function well in Venus's rashis. And so there's that need for Jupiter to either be in its own sign or to be emotionally content, to bring, I would say, almost a degree of anchoring to that Jupiter.
Yes, because my beliefs flip very often, because I can see it from both sides, or I doubt.
I have Jupiter in Gemini, so I completely get it.
And that's what Jupiter is belief of my husband. He doesn't even read spiritual books. Like, I'm constantly have to read to remind myself to be on the path. He doesn't, and he has so much more faith. And he's like, and I start doubting something. He says, stop, it's so obvious that this is, the good moral position or whatever. I'm like, how do you know that? And he says, I don't know. What if
because you can see both sides of it, and he's going, well, I just know because I surrendered to that.
Yes, he just
exactly
knows. He just feels it. He says, I feel divine presence. I know it, so I don't have to constantly read that God created us, like it's in my bones, What about if your Darakaraka, so the planet with the smallest degree, is very strong? Do you need someone with a weak?
No, well, it means quite simply, and there's always exceptions, and those exceptions generally tend to get created by the dasha period that we're in. So in other words, like you could have a really strong Darakaraka. So for the most part, you'll have a good opportunity to attract to yourself the type of spouse that you need. Whereas when it's weak, they generally tend to predominate towards those that they don't need. It doesn't mean your relationship's doomed. It just means you have to work a little harder at it. And when you have a strong Darakaraka, you generally, for the most part, tend to gravitate towards those people that you need. And of course, you can go through an occasional dasha period or a planetary period where you are having difficulty in relationships, and then that can make it a little more challenging. But we're looking really at the overall energy in terms of that, and what's good for a person and what's not good for a person. So if there's a strong Darakaraka, it would function much like if there's a weak Darakaraka, with the exception that the person generally has better luck with it. So of course they're still looking for a good strong Darakaraka planet. That part of it's simple. Another thing that's really interesting is when, let's say for instance, someone has Venus as their Darakaraka. It's also occasionally good for them to get into relationships with someone who maybe has Venus as the Atmakaraka, which we haven't discussed yet. And that's another good factor. The Atmakaraka is the self planet, right? Which is the highest degree.
So that's
the planet.
The Atmakaraka.
Exactly. The Atmakaraka is the person whose chart we're looking at. Yeah, so sometimes you'll see really good matches in the horoscope where you've got one person's Darakaraka is the other person's Atmakaraka, and vice versa. I've seen those really natural relationships that tend to happen. A lot of times they tend to gravitate towards that particular connection. But while we're on the subject of that, here's another thing I often like to talk to people about with relationships, which is quite often you'll, as astrologers, we'll have people who will come to us and the person will be really enthusiastic about a relationship, and they'll go like, oh, I just got into a relationship and I'm in my Ketu dasha and the person's Ketu is right on top of my Venus. And so I just know that it's a complete karmic connection. And what they don't think about is karmic connection is not always the most ideal. Because what are you going to do when the karma is complete, right? You have to work a little harder at those relationships. And so a lot of times people don't think about the little subtle things with astrology, and nakshatras generally tend to provide a lot of those subtleties, and that's what I really like about them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Yes, carry on.
Yeah, so what I thought I would do first in our discussion today is share a little bit of information. Let me bring a chart up, because there are, with the nakshatras, let's see if I can find my screen share here. Great. There are 3 different kingdoms of the nakshatras, and this is a really simple way to understand each nakshatra. And those kingdoms are the Mula kingdom, which is the plant kingdom. There's the Dhatu kingdom, which is the mineral kingdom. And then there's the Jiva kingdom, which is the animal kingdom. Let's start with the Jiva kingdom, because that one's a lot of fun. So what's the animal kingdom all about? What's the law of the jungle? That's what I always ask people with the Jiva Nakshatras. The law of the jungle is eat or be eaten, dominate or submit, lead or follow, right? And so that's the Jiva Nakshatra approach. Generally, Jiva Nakshatras are needing to learn lessons about assertiveness, right? When to be assertive, when to be more passive, and how to find that that appropriate balance. So if you have like your Darakaraka in a Jiva Nakshatra, that means you're naturally going to gravitate towards partners that are more assertive, right? And you can often find that people who get into relationships with Darakaraka people who have Jiva Nakshatras, they will be really interested in finding somebody stronger than them. They always want someone who's stronger than they are. Okay, but if that very same person, if the native has an Atmakaraka perhaps that's also Jiva,
also
a lot of times, yeah, a lot of times what will happen is they'll go for somebody stronger than them, and then they'll get into a strength contest with that person until they rise above that other person's strength, and that other person becomes submissive to them, and then they lose respect for the person.
Yeah. Wow. So
and
if
so
you have Dara and Atmakaraka Jiva, you're a bit screwed.
It's a rough connection, and you'll probably, and when we get into the rest of them, you'll begin to see how these things begin to fit in, which let's go into one that would gravitate well with the Jiva Nakshatras, and those are the Dhatu Nakshatras, okay? So Dhatu is the mineral kingdom, right? And so mineral kingdom is sounds really funny because, you know, when you try to figure that one out, all you're going to do is go, it's just a rock. Okay. But we stand on a very big rock, and that's the earth. And the earth is our support. So with Dhatu Nakshatras, the very big lesson with the Dhatu Nakshatras is how to be strong enough inside of yourself to be supportive to other people. When Dhatu Nakshatras are functioning in their more negative polarity or difficult polarity, then the person's often going to feel like nobody supports me. There's nobody there to be a support for me. I'm always supporting everybody else and nobody supports me.
I'm a rock, yeah, but yeah.
And so they need those Jiva. They need those Jiva Nakshatra people to kind of step into the equation and take charge of things and be there as a support for them.
That would mean if your self-planet, the planet with the highest degrees in a Dhatu mineral, you would probably need someone whose self-planet Atmakaraka is in a Jiva Nakshatra. That's what you mean.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix. So let's kind of go into that a little bit. So if you're Darakaraka, let's say you're, pardon me, let's say your Darakaraka is in a Dhatu Nakshatra. Okay, if your Darakaraka is in a Dhatu Nakshatra, you're generally going to gravitate towards those people who are more supportive, as long as that planet is strong and as long as the Nakshatra influencing planet is also strong, which we can go into that here in a little bit. And also the Atmakaraka needs to be considered. I would give the Atmakaraka more importance than that. So if you had like a Dhatu Atmakaraka, they're generally going to work better with Jiva, Jiva like people, Jiva Atmakaraka type people, right? But they will naturally gravitate towards those Dhatu Nakshatra people. And as long as they can find a good Dhatu Nakshatra person, that can actually work. But if they find a weak Dhatu Nakshatra person, that's not going to work. It's kind of complex, but a good way to understand it simply is you want to take the Atmakaraka planet and the kingdom of that, and you want to kind of go, okay, this would naturally gravitate well with, like Dhatu would gravitate well with Jiva, but it needs to be a good, strong Jiva planet. Or it will also gravitate well with the strong version of its Darakaraka.
Mhm.
So a little bit of both. Those will be the good matches for the person. Now, let's get into the plant kingdom. And I have a little lesson that I like to do for the plant kingdom. So let's imagine, for the sake of imagination, that this is a flower that's outside. And we're going to say the sun's overhead. And there's also a lamp there. I know it's kind of like, why is there a lamp outside? But there is a lamp outside, okay? So the sun's overhead, and that flower is going to grow naturally towards the sun. But when that sun goes behind a cloud, that flower will start adjusting towards that other source of light.
Mhm.
Then the sun comes back out again, and it changes its direction and moves towards the sun again. And it will tend to adapt and move around in order to get that sunlight, because that's its nourishment. And in terms of digging its roots in, when the ground gets dry, it's going to try to, get its roots in more deeply to get to where that nourishment is. So with Mula Nakshatras, the key word is nourishment and being able to adapt to find the nourishment that you need. But the weakness with the Mula Nakshatras is they can be a little too adaptable when they need to be firmer, right? So they're going to do well with the Dhatu Nakshatra.
With the mineral, yeah.
Yeah, with the mineral, because they'll be there to give them support. They're not going to do so well with the Jiva Nakshatra.
And that's compared through Atmakarakas.
Yes, so if the person has a Mula Atmakaraka, which doesn't mean your Atmakaraka in Mula Nakshatra. It means in a Nakshatra that's part of the Mula kingdom, in which I have some examples. We can go through those particular examples. I actually put together Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, which was a really good example of that, right? But yeah, you look at the person's Atmakaraka for that, and then you look at the Darakaraka, and you look at the person's Atmakaraka for that, and you look at the other person's Atmakaraka in order to get an idea of like the gelling well together. But you also look at the person's Atmakaraka and their Darakaraka to see another good match that they get. So you see there's two potential good matches. One is just based on the kingdom of the nakshatra, less than the actual planet. Yeah.
Okay. Can you show us, if you have a list of which are the plant nakshatras, which are the mineral and animals, so people maybe can stop the video and find out?
Yeah, maybe what we can do with that, because I don't know if I have a list compiled, but what we can do is we can go in, because on this is actually a PowerPoint from a course that I taught on the nakshatra, so we can go through each individual nakshatra.
Okay.
So Ashwini is a Dhatu Nakshatra.
Can you kill them by, that was plant? No, that was mineral.
Dhatu is mineral. Dhatu is mineral.
Okay. Oh,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Dhatu is mineral. So Bharani Nakshatra, that's a Mula Nakshatra or a plant Nakshatra.
Okay.
Right. Kritika Nakshatra is the Jiva Nakshatra or an animal Nakshatra. Okay, and when you get to Rohini Nakshatra, that's a Dhatu based Nakshatra, a mineral Nakshatra, in other words. Mrigashira is a Mula Nakshatra or a plant Nakshatra. And Ardra Nakshatra is a Jiva Nakshatra. So what you'll find is it alternates every third one. So Ashwini will be Dhatu, right? Bharani will be Mula, okay? Kritika will be Jiva.
Mineral, plant, animal, mineral.
Yeah,
plant.
mineral, plant, animal, over and over again.
And I just want to tell to people, if they want to find out what their Atmakaraka, when they find it, what nakshatra it is, just go to my birth chart calculator. There is, you can enter your details, and it's all the nakshatras will come up there. So you find the planet with the lowest degree. This is your relationship planet, and the planet with the highest degree. This is you, and see what nakshatra is opposite it, and then come here and look through the nakshatras to see what they are. Carry on, sorry. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Shall we go further through the list? We were on.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. No worries. So let's just roll through it again. So Ashwini is Dhatu, Bharani is Mula, Kritika is Jiva, Rohini is Dhatu, Mrigashira is Mula, and Ardra is Jiva. Punarvasu is Dhatu.
Can you call them like animal, plant, and
yeah, that's probably a better way to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Sorry, because
okay.
a lot of people, I find it difficulty dealing with Vedic terms.
I completely understand. I just get into that mindset and roll with it. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. So Ashwini is mineral, yeah. Bharani is plant, and Kritika is animal. Mm-hmm. And then Rohini is mineral, Mrigashira is plant, and Ardra is animal. Mm-hmm. Punarvasu is mineral. Pusha is going to be plant, and Ashlesha will be animal, right? Magha is mineral. Purva Falguni will be plant, and Uttara Falguni will be animal. And then Hasta Nakshatra will be mineral. Chitra will be plant, and Swati will be animal. Vishaka Nakshatra will be mineral. Aniruddha Nakshatra will be plant. Jeshta Nakshatra will be animal. Mula Nakshatra, sounds awkward, will be mineral. Okay. Purva Ashada will be plant. Uttada Ashada will be animal. Shrava Nakshatra will be mineral. Dhanishta Nakshatra will be plant. Shatabhishak Nakshatra will be animal. And then Purva Bhadrapada Nakshatra will be mineral. Uttada Bhadrapada Nakshatra will be plant. And believe it or not, Revati Nakshatra is animal. Mm-hmm. Which creates a really interesting dynamic on that point, because Revati Nakshatra is a gentle and friendly animal nakshatra.
It's like a bunny. Right? It's a bunny.
With sharp teeth that you don't want to get in the way of. No, the way I've actually seen that play out with Revati people is the concept of gentle persuasion, right? So they'll want to lead through gentle persuasion. At its worst, at its best, what that can create is someone who leads without the other person knowing they're being led. At its worst, you have passive aggressive tendencies because the person wants to be assertive, but they act like they want to be, like, really like, gentle and friendly, but they have sometimes an ulterior motive. So, and so it can play out that way. So generally what we're looking for is we look at the person's Atmakaraka, and it'll give you a good idea of the types of partners that they're going to gravitate towards best. And what you'll generally find is, I would type it here on the screen, but I think that it would get all confusing with the PowerPoint. Jiva nakshatras or animal nakshatras don't do well with other animal nakshatras. Because they'll both want to dominate. And it can be, unless of course there's, good, strong planets there and good, strong, what I like to call nakshatra emissaries rather than dispositors, because, even though they would be looked at as being a similar concept as a dispositor, planets don't really rule nakshatras. They're kind of like the messenger for a nakshatra. But their strength or well-being influences that nakshatra in a specific way. So say, for instance, Ashwini Nakshatra is connected to the south node. So if there's a good south node in the chart, that's actually gonna help Ashwini Nakshatra, and so on and so forth. So if you have two people if you have someone with an Atmakaraka in a animal nakshatra, and they connect with another person who has an Atmakaraka in an animal nakshatra, and there's a lot of good, strong energy between those two planets, they'll probably find a good balance on, like, when they're coming up against each other, how to retreat, or let the tension get discharged in a very passionate or even animalistic way. If you have someone who has their Atmakaraka in a plant nakshatra, and you put them in a relationship, for the most part, with someone in an animal nakshatra, the plant nakshatra people are needing that like nice, gentle, nourishing energy. They want to nourish other people, but they want to be nourished as well. And so if you have that assertive energy, it's going to feel a little bit brash to them. But occasionally they'll be drawn to that animal nakshatra energy like a moth to a flame.
Yeah.
And get pulled into something that's, that's a little more passionate than perhaps they feel that they can handle at that particular moment in time. Generally good matches for plant nakshatra people are other plant nakshatra people, because they'll, mutually nourish, or mineral nakshatra people who are wanting to be supportive, because the plant people need someone to support them, and the mineral nakshatra people need someone who's going to nourish them when they need support. And so those generally tend to work well with each other. Mineral nakshatra people can work well with other mineral nakshatra people as long as that energy is strong. So in other words, if you had someone with their Atmakaraka and a mineral nakshatra, and they got into a relationship with someone who had an afflicted planet in a mineral nakshatra, and the dispositor / emissary of that planet was also afflicted, then they're going to spend their whole relationship like hearing that other person go, "You never give me any support," and they're going to be trying to give so much support to that person, but yet that person's never going to appreciate it in the first place.
Wow. It's fascinating. I have both Atmakaraka and Darakaraka. I just checked at Hasta and Ashwini, which is mineral, isn't it? Both a mineral.
Yeah.
Let's check my husband. while you're checking, because it's fascinating material.
Yeah. And another thing that comes into it, but it's a little more complex, is the nature of the nakshatra too, is like, for instance, there are what are called fixed and firm nakshatras, right? And then there are movable and changeable nakshatras, right? So if you're someone who's got a mineral nakshatra that's fixed and firm, it may be a little bit difficult for you to be with someone who has like an uneasy energy that's always feeling like it needs to be supported, or like can't sit still, for instance. And so there are all sorts of different layers that you can work with it. But it's kind of interesting to go through and go, okay, well, the person's Atmakaraka is in an animal nakshatra, right? So they're very assertive, but they always tend to attract to themselves these Darakaraka people who are plant nakshatra people. And that can create some explosiveness in the relationship, where the oftentimes the plant nakshatra person might feel that they're becoming, for lack of a better way to put it, a doormat for the animal nakshatra person. Yeah. So there's all sorts of different interesting layers. Did you find the information you were looking for?
Yeah, my husband Atmakaraka is Kritika, which was, what was that?
That's an animal.
Animal. Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm rock. So
You said where's your Atmakaraka?
Ashwini, so mineral.
Yeah, so you're mineral.
So that was okay?
It can be. You have to bring some other factors into the horoscope, into the equation. It depends on, so his is Kritika. Kritika tends to be a bit mixed, right? And so it's going to be adaptable. So he has an adaptable animal nakshatra. Which, with your light and swift mineral nakshatra, which is going, I'm always want to be a support. I want to be very quick to be a support and do the right thing, right? He's going to like process things, go through processes, purify the factors that he's needing to be assertive about, rather than being with someone who might have, like, for instance, a sharp or hard animal nakshatra. Like Ashlesha people might be a little more difficult for you to gravitate with towards. Yeah.
Wow.
In that particular scenario. So there's so much you can do with this. There's so much you can do with it, and so much you can understand about a person and the types of relationships they get in. And I have some examples for us today that we can go through. Like, let's go into one of the most famous relationships of all time, which was Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, who were on again, off again, on again, off again, on again, off again, and couldn't be with each other. They just couldn't be with each other, but they couldn't leave each other alone at the same time. And so if you look at her Atmakaraka is the moon. Okay, so that tells you something immediately. So if the Atmakaraka is the moon is known to be what's called a creeping planet. It's going to do what it needs to do to get the nourishment or what it needs, or it's going to try to do the things that it needs to do in order to get the nourishment that it needs. When the moon is, when the Atmakaraka is in Scorpio, it can quite often create this tendency in the individual to feel undernourished. In a school of astrology called Jaimini astrology, they refer to Scorpio as being deprived of that which is in the mother's breast. So sometimes the person may not be breastfed, or there's a disconnect from the mother in the person's life. And that can leave a wound, like a very big wound in the person's heart. As you can see with Anuradha Nakshatra, Anuradha Nakshatra is a plant nakshatra.
Yes.
So Elizabeth Taylor needed someone is adaptable. So she needed someone who was going to be supportive, like a mineral nakshatra, or she needed someone who was going to equally be adaptable, which is why Elizabeth Taylor got into like relationship after relationship and married, divorce, over and over and over again throughout the course of her life. And so when you go and you look at Richard Burton's chart, and you look at his Atmakaraka, which is Mars, right? And so first of all, you know that Mars is going to be really assertive energy. It's going to be really assertive energy, and that's Mars in Libra. So it's going to, have an eye for which actions are the good ones to take and which actions aren't the good ones to take. Where are proper outlets for my passions and where are improper outlets for my passions, which doesn't mean that he was chaste, because chastity was a real problem with Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. He was known to be somewhat of a womanizer, and he had a reputation before they got together. But Swati Nakshatra is an animal nakshatra. So there was this thing in their connection where, like, there was this feeling in her that this is not somebody I should be with. But supposedly their relationship started on the set and through different characters that they were each meant to be, and like it involved a kissing scene, and that's kind of what set it all off. And that's why I was mentioning that moth to the flame type thing. It gets attracted to this thing that's going to burn it up, but it just cannot stay away from it. Here's a little trick too. Whenever you see the Atmakaraka, with exceptions, there's some things that kind of, what's the best way to say it, that alleviate this a little bit, right? But if you see the Atmakaraka, in this instance Mars, and Mars is either in Libra, Taurus, Aries, or Scorpio, that's someone that you have to be careful leaving them alone in the room with the opposite sex.
Because they're very amorous.
They can't control their passions. And it's not even just Mars. It can be any planet. If it's in Libra, Taurus, Scorpio, or Aries, it's somebody you have to kind of keep your eye on. Unless K2 is interacting with it, which will tend to make the person be a little more controlling of that.
So basically the signs of Venus and Mars, if you have the planet with the highest degree,
Yeah.
Kind of Venus or Mars.
Yeah.
These people are more amorous. Both me and my husband have that. I'm glad we don't see anyone. It's just the two of us. I'm never going to leave him in a room with another.
But what you'll find though too is if you have the South Node interacting by something called Rashi aspect or conjuncting it, or if you have Jupiter there with it, it'll make it a little more controlled because the person's able to apply spiritual insight to their passions.
And if you have
But
right there, the opposite.
and actually that's exactly what Jamie says about that. If Rahu's there, forget about it. The person's not, they're not going to be able to control it. They'll just do it over and over again, and it's something you have to be really careful for. So all you Rahu, Mars, or Rahu Atmakaraka people with the planet in Taurus, Libra, Aries, or Scorpio, don't send me lots of hate emails about how I messed up your relationships. Okay. So, but you can see that she got attracted to him. Swati Nakshatra also. Swati Nakshatra is very restless energy. So what ends up happening is if someone gets into a relationship with someone whose Atmakaraka is in Swati or their Darakaraka is in Swati, that's another thing where you really have to watch out for the person's, well, for lack of a better way to put it, to watch out for their fidelity. Because that person is very independent in relationships. When the relationship begins to get a little bit
Stale,
uncomfortable, they're gonna get itchy feet and want to and they'll almost like purposefully collapse the relationship.
my husband has Darakaraka there. I have to watch him out.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
But those are some really interesting things. And so if you can see, she had her Atmakaraka. I have to close that so I can open the other one. Her Atmakaraka was in Anuradha. And so Anuradha is a gentle and friendly plant nakshatra.
No, sorry, my husband. Darakaraka is different. It's an Aratha.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So you're fine. So, her nakshatra is Anuradha. So Anuradha people, a big lesson for them is learning an appropriate sense of boundaries with other people, right? They can merge completely with another person. If there's a weak Saturn in the equation though, it creates problems because what will happen is the boundary line between the individual and their partner gets blurry. And they can become a little too smothering, cross their partner's boundaries, not give the appropriate sense of space to the individual, right? She has a good, strong Saturn in her chart. And that's likely why there was this whole thing of going, I'm completely devoted to you. I don't want to see you.
Wow.
Completely devoted to you. I really don't want to see you. And there's that over-adaptability of the plant nakshatra. I'm getting nourishment from you right now, but now you're being too assertive, so I have to go find my nourishment somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If you go look at his chart, we were looking at his Atmakaraka, which is an animal nakshatra, right? And we were looking at her Atmakaraka, which is a plant nakshatra. Let's look at his Darakaraka. Okay. His Darakaraka is Venus. Yeah. And Venus is in Purva Ashada, which is actually a plant nakshatra. So if you can see,
it's both plant.
That's what he attracted to himself. Yeah.
So go
ahead.
The plant woman, and she's a plant woman.
And she's a plant woman, so it worked out perfectly. It worked out perfectly for him. And that's why their relationship worked so well. If we go and look at her Darakaraka, which I actually haven't looked at yet, so let's take a look and see. Her Darakaraka is Saturn, which is it's in Shravana Nakshatra, and that's going to be a mineral nakshatra. So she was needing someone to be much more supportive. But here's the really interesting energy, and this is what I was talking about with the nature of the nakshatras. So Shravana Nakshatra is a moving and unsteady mineral nakshatra. So think of a rock, right? And that rock is on like a cliff edge. It's going to sit on that cliff edge for hundreds and hundreds of years. But then it only takes like one little bit of dirt to come out from underneath it. Kinetic energy goes rolling along. And so that's one of the reasons why minerals have so much energy in them. They store that kinetic energy in them. And so Chara and Chala mineral people, or moving and unsteady mineral people, sometimes it's uncomfortable to be around them. Because, you know, they'll want to be supportive, but if you're sensitive at all, their energy is going to be too restless to kind of be around. And so that was likely an issue with her and him, is she likely felt upon occasion that he was too seriously minded. Shravana Nakshatra also tends to create a conflict of paths. Do I go this way or do I go that way? I don't know which way I should go. This path, that path. And so she likely felt that he was untrue as well and couldn't commit when she needed him to commit most.
Wow, you're a master at nakshatras, Michael. You just so know.
Oh, I just love them. I have the moon on the ascendant. So.
Oh yeah, and the nakshatra, the moon day.
Exactly. I find people who have moon on the ascendant, they just naturally gravitate towards the nakshatras. They
like a whole different
absolutely love them.
It's the nakshatra.
They are. They're really fascinating. One of the things I often tell people, and this is usually one of the reasons why people don't get nakshatras, because you can't think and analyze a nakshatra. You have to try to feel it. You have to try to feel its energy. And I always tell people, if they want to get better at learning the nakshatras, a good way to do that is to monitor the moon's movement over the over the course of a month. Really do that for like a good year, maybe even 2 years, and tune into that nakshatra, learn a little bit about it, and try to tune into what you're feeling that day. And that'll teach you more about the nakshatra than just simply reading about it. Because nakshatras are like this, a good way to explain them is they're kind of like this amorphous blob, okay? Because if you look, you'll go through and you can look at them and you might see strong, firm energy mixed with passive energy and feminine energy. And you're going, how do I blend all of that together? And what determines that?
Unsteady, like I'm looking at it.
Yeah, exactly. And so what determines which of those come out are the planet that's placed in it and planets that interact with it. That determines what's going to predominate out of all those different things. And so nakshatras are a little bit more of a confusing thing to work with, which is why a lot of people don't put information out about nakshatras, because they're just really complex.
And do you have a course on nakshatras people can maybe take?
I actually do. I have an online academy that's like memberships there start at like $29.99 a month. And there's a course called Esoteric and Therapeutic Secrets of the Nakshatras, which is like an hour on each nakshatra, where we go over each nakshatra, talk about it. And there's another course there on the that's a previous course that I taught, and I'm in the process of editing it and uploading it. So it's not complete, but people can start it already. And that's on the nodes through the nakshatras. So you can learn about the spiritual lessons of your nodal axis through the nakshatras and what that's all about.
And do you do private readings that someone maybe can order a reading for a relationship with you, like you?
Yes, and I actually created a very special relationship consultation just for this appearance, which is actually called, creatively enough, the Special Relationship Consultation.
Special.
So if you go to my astrological services page, there's a relationship consultation that's there. And what I do on that consultation is try to keep my headphones from falling out my ears, is actually I take a look at the Darakaraka in your chart. Look at, what you naturally attract to yourself. I look at your Atmakaraka in contrast to your Darakaraka. And there's another, and go over the Nakshatra information that I've discussed here, plus a lot more in association with that. And there's another technique where you can look at the 7th house from the Atmakaraka and the main birth chart, something called the D7 chart and the D9 chart, and look at influences to that. And you can see also a little more in depth the types of partners the person tends to be attracted to. Like, does the person go for people from other countries? Or do they get a spouse who's from another country, but perhaps of the same cultural background as them, right? Or do they go for the artist types? And so that information's kind of mixed into the equation along with the next relationship period for the person and the type of person that they're likely to meet for that.
Fantastic. And your website, what is it?
Is pulseoftheuniverse.com.
What?
Pulse of the Universe. Pulse is in heartbeat. Pulseoftheuniverse.com.
I'll try and put the link below as well in the video.
Yeah, definitely. Pulseoftheuniverse.com. It's kind of like the concept of tuning into the pulse of the universe, because that's what astrologers do, is we're kind of trying to tune in to the pulse of the universe and what's going on with it,
That's very moon on the ascendant, tuning in.
Yeah. I mean, my journey with nakshatras it's really interesting. And I remember reading your story about astrology, and you and I had a similar experience in some ways. I remember your story about the book falling off the shelf.
Yeah.
Right. So what happened with me was when I first started engaging with Vedic astrology, I got into the nakshatras and I knew how to use them, but I didn't know how. I knew how to use them.
You just knew.
Exactly. And I started working with them and I went, wow, I really want to find out, pardon me, more information on the nakshatras. And so one day I went to a metaphysical bookstore, and I wasn't even looking for a book on the nakshatras. I was just kind of trying to spend some time and find something interesting to do because it was a boring day. And I went over to the astrology section, and there was Dennis Harness's book on the nakshatras, right? And so I bought it. And later on in life, Dennis becomes a good friend of mine, and it's interesting, how life takes us places and brings experiences into our lives.
It's especially when you align yourself to something with a desire and intention.
Exactly. And that's, my journey with astrology kind of happened in a similar way too, which is once I got into doing astrology, I couldn't do anything else. I even tried to do other things in life, and nothing else that I tried to do would work out.
I'm so useless in anything else, to be honest. I understand why in ancient India they separated people by Brahmins, the teachers.
Yeah, the caste, exactly.
Workers, traders, because people like us, like the Brahmins, we're useless for anything else but just knowledge.
Exactly. Exactly, and it's like, you pretty much talk to anybody who does astrology, and everybody has a very similar experience, which is you don't necessarily choose to do astrology. Astrology chooses you.
But then sometimes it's very autistic on other areas of life.
Exactly. But then once astrology grabs a hold of you, sometimes it doesn't let you do anything else. My experience with that, it was really interesting because I went through a very difficult period of life where I kept trying to do other things as a profession, and nobody would hire me because I had been self-employed for a while. I went through this really interesting experience of going, okay, well, astrology is not earning money, but nobody's hiring me. So I guess I just have to keep doing astrology and trying to do that.
Yeah.
But then sometimes it can put you through the test, and then when it puts you through the test, it can equally reward you.
No. We have to be quite dedicated and I would say pure in intention and motivation, because you can do so much harm. And I even read somewhere in the esoteric text that the biggest sin is not even killing or something like that. The biggest karmic repercussions is for giving wrong information. And because wrong
Good point.
information can damage a person so much worse. And
That's why Jupiter makes a good planet for astrologers. And interestingly enough, in Jaimini's Upadesha Sutras, when he talks about Jupiter, he goes, Jupiter is someone who's all-knowing and understands, but they don't talk very much.
yeah.
Because they have a hard time finding the right words. And Jupiter is also a grammarian. They're going to choose their words carefully. And I find quite often in my consultations that I'll have my clients go, oh, it's okay, you can just say it, you can just say it. And I go, no, I don't dice my words. I will obviously speak what I need to say, but I'm trying to find the right word to convey the meaning that you need to hear, so you'll grasp on to the information that I'm trying to give you. Venus energies, like a Venus Atmakaraka, that also makes a good astrologer, because Venusian people, they want to make a person have an experience of something. They want to make them taste it.
That's my Atmakaraka, Venus.
Is it? There you go. Venus makes really excellent.
My Jupiter is weak, but Venus is.
Venus is another good astrologer planet.
Yeah.
Is another good astrologer planet, because it will give the person an experience of it. And actually, Jaimini says about Venus, he says, Venus is a poet, eloquent, and wise as a sage knowing prophecy. Which is why Venus is an astrologer planet. So Jupiter, Venus, they're both the Brahman planets, you see?
The teacher planet. I know that Venus is the teacher of the Asura, no, what is it?
Correct. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah, and Jupiter of the gods. But Venus kind of teaches you very much more like the worldly side of things. So
exactly.
Spiritual side of things. So
exactly. And that's why those two planets, they're inimical to each other. And that's something really interesting. I'm getting on a roll, so you just have to kind of go, stop there for a moment. Is, you would think if you saw Jupiter and Venus joining each other in the horoscope, that you'd go, wow, that's a really good connection. But those two planets don't really work that well together on a certain level, because what happens is Jupiter gets starved by Venus. Yeah.
So the spiritual pursuits get distracted by worldly pleasures.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. A lot of times the way that energy plays out in the horoscope is something worldly attracts the person, and then later on they feel spiritually bad that they went in that area.
And I've seen, actually, Venus is helped by Jupiter, because Jupiter...
And it gets delighted. Yeah, Venus gets delighted by Jupiter. Yeah.
People with Jupiter-Venus conjunction, they get a lot of the good things in life.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
The Venusian things, pleasures, maybe more relationships than normal, more glamorous things. But that distracts them from the Jupiter path, because Jupiter is weakened by Venus. And Jupiter is ultimately true joy within.
Exactly. It's that contentment. That's why Jupiter is so happy in Cancer, because it's content there, It's not like turbulent emotions. It's just content with life. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Michael.
It was a pleasure. I had a lot of fun.
Fascinating insight. Hope to have you again another time here.
Yeah, that would be great.
And if anyone would like to contact Michael, I'll put a link below as well. Pulse of the Universe.
Pulseoftheuniverse.com.
Universe.com is your website. Thank you. And
excellent.
Great day.
Yes, thank you so much.